Thank you very much, Phil. This has been great. And, as a political scientist, I love comparative examples. So the opportunity to talk with such knowledgeable individuals here about what's happening, not only in Pennsylvania, but elsewhere, I think that's really powerful to get some really interesting, innovative ideas and for policy making purposes. So I want to introduce our panel here. They're going to take about 10 minutes each to talk about their organization, some of the things that they've been working on in their states to help with broadband expansion, workforce development issues, and then we're just going to open it up for a Q&A amongst everyone here. So directly to my left, we have Natalie Rover, and she is the director of the Federal Access Center of the Just Transition Fund, and she's conducting strategic outreach and support to help whole communities secure funding for local economic issues. She previously worked as executive director of Generation West Virginia for 7 years, developing and leading a diverse set of programs and policy initiatives to expand economic opportunity throughout the state. She has a Master of Public Policy and a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia. And then we have Christine Hallquist, Executive Director of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. Christine is the Executive Director of the board and is charged with getting every Vermont address connected to fiber optic internet and making it affordable and maximizing the position of social impact for those investments. Hallquist started her career with Digital Equipment Corporation, working in power system designs and manufacturing. She was Vermont's Democratic candidate for governor in 2018, and in 2019, Hallquist formed a Canadian joint venture company to develop porous silicon battery that would provide 3 times the energy density of lithium iron. Online, we are joined by Sharonne Navas. Sharonne is the co-founder and executive director of the Equity in Education Coalition, first American-born child of immigrant parents from Guatemala and El Salvador. She understands and values the complexity of being multilingual and multicultural in America. Past professions include being a community organizer with Stand for Children, executive director of Paros Los Niños, assistant director of development for Neighborhood Pro-Choice America, deputy executive director for Ion Inc., and a wide variety of other backgrounds. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology from St. John's University. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg. Stephen has been executive director of the Keystone Research Center since December of 1995. He was also the coordinator of the Reimagine Appalachia campaign, for which he has co-authored an introductory overview on broadband and a brief on principles for safe broadband policies. And that's just a small sampling of his work. I really encourage you to check out some of the other works that KRC has done, just in a wide range of policy areas. And Stephen has a PhD in economics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie here to get us started. Natalie.
Hi, so excited to be here in Pennsylvania. I am going to be talking with you a little bit about what we've learned at the Just Transition Fund from our grant making in 46 states that are coal impacted. I'll be talking really about lessons learned for rural workforce overall that could be applied to broadband. And I will go through a few slides, but just really excited for a conversation after this. Yeah, okay, great. So I'm just going to start briefly with who we are. We're a national philanthropy. We provide grants and technical assistance with a mission of supporting economic diversification in communities that have been dependent on the coal industry. So we work every day to make sure that people are not left behind in that transition and supporting initiatives in economic development, workforce development, and of course, broadband infrastructure. We got our start back when the Appalachian Regional Commission launched its Power Initiative, which was the first source of federal funding directed for coal communities. And what our co-founders saw then, and what still is the bread and butter of our work now, is that without strategic interventions, federal funds are going to go to the same organizations that are already really well resourced. Federal funds are complex. You add technical broadband to the mix, they're even more complex. It takes real people power and resources that often our most distressed communities don't have access to. So that's really why we do what we do, why we've now been doing this work for almost a decade. We scaled all that up in what we call now our Federal Access Center, which I'll talk a little bit about. Just for context, this is the coal communities across the country. Of course, in PA, in Appalachia, you're probably very familiar with this, but I always like to show this slide because this is a problem that impacts the entire country. It's a little over 10% of counties have either a coal plant or mine as of 2016. That doesn't even account for the adjacent counties that are, of course, facing an economic impact from this economic transition. So this is where we work, and today I'll be talking about some lessons learned based on our grant making. So I already talked about kind of what our framework for economic transition is. I have just been like +1ing all of the amazing speakers talking about the foundational role that broadband plays in economic development. That's why it's one of our priorities as well. If our priority is to make sure that people have economic opportunities, we have to also be talking about broadband. I'll talk more about kind of the Federal Access Center support that we have, but I gave a spiel briefly earlier because I just couldn't not share it on that panel. But basically, we provide grants and technical assistance to help people apply for federal funds in any of those. So anyway, I just can't be on the stage and not say, we have money, please talk to me if you need it. Okay, so based on all of our, again, almost decade of grant making, we are often asked kind of what is the most effective workforce strategies in transitioning communities. Broadband, as all of our speakers have shared today, is really such an exciting economic opportunity, not just for its infrastructure, but for the jobs, the long-term sector of opportunities that this creates across so many different occupations. So we really see two things that are really important to be keeping in mind that the previous panel beautifully set up. So one, which I don't think I need to talk about much because again, the previous panel spoke about this, but the importance of making sure that the training is for truly in-demand jobs with private partners that are already engaged and ready to hire. Traditional workforce programs fail when there is training without a connection to jobs on the other side. So this, for us, number one, making sure that as we are developing out these programs, you are doing so with the private partners at the table who have open careers, ready to hire, so that people are not just being trained for training's sake, but this is actually a job placement process and program. The second thing that is really important in our communities is the importance of holistic wraparound support. The other reason, so there's really sort of two reasons we think that traditional workforce programs don't work. One is if we're training folks for jobs that aren't readily available with local opportunities and employers ready to hire. The other is people don't finish the training. And that's often because of a lot of life barriers that happen, whether that's childcare that was brought up earlier, transportation, trauma, all the many things that will stop someone from being able to complete a program. So we have to really take seriously both of these components, making sure that we are creating solid employer-driven training, but also making sure we're supporting people so they can actually complete it. So here are just some of the key partners we see communities working with the most. Again, many of these have been brought up before. Employers got to be at the table for that really in-demand, making sure this is really employer-informed, having partnerships who can either commit to hiring, building this training, providing on-the-job training, working with unions in any apprenticeable possible position. They are really good at that paid on-the-job training, reducing one of those barriers that would make it hard for someone to actually complete the training. Also working with academic institutions, both 4- and 2-year colleges. There's amazing opportunities through the community and technical institutions through Learn and Earn funding that allows people to be able to really work and learn both through unions, but also other kinds of programs. Again, if you're working closely with an employer, this is, of course, an ecosystem. One of the case studies I'll talk about in a second is sort of how unions can work closely with community technical college institutions as kind of this career pathway. Workforce development boards have such important access wraparound support through WIOA funding that can help cover some of those transportation costs, some of those barriers. but also in our really powerful conveners, bringing all the people to the table. But also really don't forget about the community-based organizations who, I know we were just hearing from a nonprofit in the back about, working with incarcerated individuals and supporting them and being ready to hire. There are so many powerful, important organizations that are working with people who have faced barriers to employment and are doing the hard wraparound work. If you are someone who's really good at training, you maybe aren't going to become the person that's really good at wraparound support. That's okay. There are amazing organizations in your community that are doing that wraparound support. And if you can provide the training and work closely with them, it can be a real win-win. So just a few case studies. Am I doing okay on time? Okay, great. So one case study I want to talk about is in Ohio. The Southern Ohio Diversification Initiative is working really closely with the steelworkers. This is an initiative that's in development. Normally I would really talk to you about something that's tried and true, but I'm so excited about this model. I just wanted to share this because I think it holds a lot of promise. What they're doing is Southern Ohio Diversification Initiative is a nonprofit who is really working directly with employers to bring new businesses to this property. And in that process, we're having intentional conversations with employers before they locate to build a workforce program at the same time with the steelworkers. Then what is incredible is that the steelworkers are saying, great. So for example, one of the needs that these employers have, it would take both the steelworkers training and a certification. So then they're partnering with a community technical college. After they go through a steelworker apprenticeship, those steelworkers who are interested can continue on through other different certifications. This is stackable credentials. So I just love this example as how all of these players are coming together and doing this from the beginning as an employer is choosing to locate here. Another example out of Ohio, Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, such an incredible program. They are doing what I think is a really wonderful best practice here. Again, they're not trying to become the workforce training folks. They are partnering with workforce partners, whether that's unions, community technical colleges, and they're doing what they do best, which is making sure that folks have affordable and sustainable housing, making sure that folks who have been facing substance abuse disorder are able to really re-enter the workforce. They're doing what they know how to do best, the case management, the really long-term intensive support, and connecting then with workforce development trainers to actually give them the skills, but they're coming alongside to make sure that the people in their program actually complete the workforce training program. So again, I think the lesson learned here is who are the nonprofit community-based partners you can be working with. We don't have to all be good at everything, but a successful workforce program is going to take all of these things into account. And then lastly, Generation West Virginia, the organization I used to run, something that they have built out is a software development training program. We're working closely with tech employers and community technical colleges. But one thing I wanted to mention, they're a nonprofit training program, but they've partnered with community technical colleges, college systems who have a learn and earn program, who allow the employers to actually get up to 50% off of the salary of the first 6 months of any graduate that they hire from this program. So there are so many creative opportunities that community technical colleges have that you can really build these partnerships again to take both the training and incentivize employers to hire people from these trainings, and learn and earn is just one example of that. Last flag, that we're talking a lot about kind of future funding, but I just want to make sure that folks know that broadband workforce, there's already a ton of money out there for workforce. I spend all day, every day trying to help communities apply for these federal grants. There's a few that are coming up. The Department of Labor's work program is due at the end of June. Phenomenal, no match, $1.5 million project for workforce initiatives. Broadband workforce programs would be a phenomenal fit for this. Building pathways to infrastructure jobs. Broadband is a sector that they have listed as a priority. So if you have a program you want to pilot, now is the time. There is money right now on the table and we can provide for it. Okay, that is it. Sorry, I might have gone too much.
Thanks so much, Natalie. That's great. Christine, please take it away.
Thank you. Before I started the technical details, there are two key events in life that really are, sit here today, that I remember that when I took this job, I realized we got a big challenge in workforce development. In 1990, I attended a 3-day conference, Harvard Kennedy School of Government, on demographics. The end of that, the punchline from that conference was, short of a massive baby boom or opening immigration, by 2020, we will not have enough workers. So the experiences we're having in broadband is with all sectors, whether it's healthcare or whatever. So we're in a different world today. The other one was, although I spent 2 days in jail in earlier life, I'm not a prison expert. But I did, when I was
Details.
when I was running for governor, criminal justice was important to me, so I spent a day in prison. And the learnings I had in that prison, I will wrap around into this presentation as well. So when I took this job, we had $245 million in our, first of all, I'm going to say, I'm really honored to do this job. And I was the CEO of Vermont Electric Cooperative. In 2003, our board of directors came and said, what do we got to do to get broadband to rural Vermonters? Working on it ever since, tried every kind of technology that exists. It was my platform when I ran for governor. I did very well considering I like Phil Scott, whoever ranking is. Correction, friends. So anyway, so I'm honored to do this job, and excited to do this job. And when starting this job, I'm a recovering engineer as well. So at the start of the job, you do the classic thing. You say, I've got project management. This is one of the big issues we're going to face in project management. Well, it's going to be materials and labor. Materials, no problem. We look at the bill of materials, what are the lead times, put it in inventory. Labor, we have a real problem, right? 1.9% unemployment rate in Vermont. What the heck are we going to do? So I went to the legislature. I got a nice relationship with the legislature. I didn't even ask for any money, but they gave a $531,000 grant, gave it to our Department of Labor, said, get Christine the people that she needs to get this job done. So, great. We worked with the Federal Broadband FBA to use their curriculum, set up classroom training. And then, of course, we had a crisis that hit with our university system. Laid people off, the Department of Labor laid people off. So finally I said, okay, give the grant to me, we'll figure it out. So we delivered the training, set it all up, nice school materials, nice job, FBA, gave us a turnkey solution. We were hired basically 2 people for a weekend, paying them $100 each for 20 hours. And there was a big snowstorm. This was just like 2 months ago. Big snowstorm. And one of the people that works in my organization said, well, Christine, should we cancel it? Oh, they can't show up with a snowstorm. They're not going to show up with a job. So, keep it going. I showed up the next day, 3 people were there. And actually, it appeared to me like only 1 was going to graduate. Now in Vermont, we need 200. We need 200 additional technicians. Say, oh, that's not a lot. But remember, we're only 650,000 people. According to 2022 census, you're 12.97 million. So take our number of 200, multiply it times 20, and you need at least 4,000 workers. Well, you're not going to get them 12 at a time. So we said, we got to revamp this program. Now, I've got to keep track of time here. So, the nice thing about my past history is I have relationships with just about every telecom construction company in the state. We built about 600 miles of fiber for our system control data acquisition network. So we did a lot of fiber swaps. I kind of know everybody. So I reached out to the employers. And let me just tell you, when I talk about 200 people needed, I'm going to tell you the good employers, here's 2 key things to look at when you're selecting a contractor. One is their workers' comp rate and their turnover. Now, the turnover is a real key thing to pay attention to here, because if you need 200 employees and you've got a 300% turnover, and by the way, you've got to train 3 to get 1, because you find out that half of people drop out because they discover they can't work in heights. So now your numbers get really difficult. And I will tell you, coming out of the electric utility world, where we had the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, they trained their folks, people were disciplined, people were safe. This is the Wild West we're in here. we've got some really bad employers, at least in Vermont. I know this one bad employer works at your state, too, I'm not gonna shame names. And I threw that employer off our system for 5 years because of their safety issue when I was at the utility. So I met, here's a meeting, I meet with a good employer, and then I'll contrast to the bad. Good employer, less than a 10% turnover rate. Bad employer, 300% turnover rate. And I've seen how these bad employers manage. You do not want to work for these places. They're worse than Starbucks. So anyway, so now what we're doing, so I decided, and this is all fresh off the press, because just last week I met with that bad employer. I said, okay, gotta make the process gonna work for that bad employer. Are you willing to do an apprenticeship program that rolls into the FBA curriculum as part of the work? Will you work with us? I can help you reduce your turnover. We haven't talked about management training, but I can help you. If you're interested, will you work with me? They said yes. Tomorrow, I'm going to meet with the best employer, going over to New Hampshire to meet with them. So I think we have a program that'll work fine. By the way, we put together a workforce, I'm sorry, I didn't even go through my slides, but we put together a workforce development team, right? Part of that kickoff of looking at workforce issues, put it there as a workforce development X. Did I do that? Anyway, and we have the IBW, CWA, every employers represented. We have a beautiful plan. I've presented all across the country this beautiful plan that's a paper tiger, nothing underneath, right? It's a great plan. We know what great plans are. But we are going to achieve that plan. And in that plan, we talk about paying it forward, talking to the employers about, if we have employees that stay for X period of time, will you willing to fund that money back into our training program? I've got a conceptual yes. Now let's go to why did I tell the prison story? Because if you look at a 1.9% employment rate, what you did before, what got you here isn't going to get you there. We have to go find people from places we never hired from before. Talk to those employers. Will you hire felons? Yes, we will. We'll put them, we're not going to hire from inside work. We'll hire from outside work. Guess what we're going to do for inside? We're working with the Vermont Workforce for Women. And they have a program, a trailblazer program, where many women want to get into this profession. Isn't that country? People working inside. So I have a lot of hopes for this program. I have a lot of hopes for this plan. And by reaching out to these groups, I have a lot of hopes we're going to get there now. But it's been a hard road. We've certainly had a lot of problems. So I still have a lot of hope. Plan's still good. Glad to send it to you. But remember, plans are as good as paper.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch online to Sharonne. Sharonne, can you hear us and see us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It is morning here in Seattle, and stereotypically it is raining. So just for all of you to know that it is torrential over here. My name is Sharonne Navas. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Equity in Education Coalition. Up until the beginning of the pandemic, we were a education policy think tank here in Washington state. But as all of you know, Washington was the first state to be hit formally with the coronavirus in December of 2019, January of 2020. We shut down in March of 2020, and my organization was tapped really quickly around March 9th, March 11th, to start looking at what the implications of shutting down the state would be for Washington state's education system, more specifically our rural communities, our communities of that are living in low-income areas, and our Black, Indigenous, and students of color communities. So with that being said, we dove straight into the digital equity world pretty quickly without really understanding what it was that we were diving into. So just a props and shout out to all of you that have been doing this work for more time than I have. I don't know how you guys do it, but I thank you for all of your wisdom so far. We were at the beginning of the pandemic, the estimate of people not having access to technology in Washington State was about 10%. Just a reminder, Washington State has about 7.1 million people living in it. So we knew that that number was just not possible when when we did some data analysis of students, we were looking at about a quarter of our students, about 293,000 to 300,000 students not having internet access at all, or having some kind of technology, not having some kind of technology access. For those that don't know Washington State very much, the geography is and the topography is very challenging. We have mountains, we have deep forestation. We also have one of the only rainforests here in North America. So the idea of just putting up broadband towers or fiber has been a challenge in Washington State. So many of you might be asking why we are here talking to all of you. When we started doing digital equity work, one of the first things that we did was we wrote the digital navigation program that is currently being funded in Washington State. And just to give you a little bit of context, in March of 2020, my organization was only a staff of 4 and a yearly budget of $440,000. So taking on an endeavor like looking at what a digital navigation program for Washington State would look like was a pretty much all-encompassing issue. We worked with the governor's office. We submitted a proposal for about $7 million to fund digital navigation here in Washington State. And one of the opportunities that we saw was that in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of our family resource folks who were doing food assistance, rental assistance, they were doing the on-the-ground work with community-based organizations, especially those that speak different languages. They pivoted really, really quickly to doing the digital navigation work, even though they weren't being paid for it. And there was no curriculum at that time here in Washington to help them understand what they were doing. So we brought together a team of partners. At that point, it was 21 community-based organizations, including Communities in Schools, which is a national organization. They have 16 affiliates here in Washington State. And we proposed to the governor a grant of $6 million to help us fund those organizations and keep them open throughout the pandemic. This was also in supplement to the PPP program, which helped a lot of our organizations stay open during the pandemic. One of the things that came up during the first negotiation of the digital navigation program was that there were a lot of veterans who are also formally incarcerated or coming into a reentry system that needed supports and they needed jobs. So we worked in partnership, and one of my other panelists was talking about not being an expert at everything. One of the things that we are really good at is coalition building and not being experts at everything. So we partnered with an organization that has a holistic approach to reentry. And we started a workforce development pipeline for veterans and veterans who are seeking reentry, and also Black, Indigenous, people of color who are coming out of the pipeline. So we go into the system about 6 months before they come out, do all the basic teachings of how to stay online, how to be safe online, how to start a rental application, how to get all of the things started and ready so that when they come out, we know that the first 72 to 144 hours of them being released are some of the most important moments of their life when it comes to recidivism. So we help them achieve things like getting an apartment, getting their childcare set up, getting their banking system set up. We also pay them. So when we develop the workforce development pipeline, one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that everybody that we work with gets paid. And we have 2 cities here that have the highest minimum wage in the nation. Tukwila has a minimum wage of $17.25, and Seattle, I think, is going to pass a minimum wage of $19.75. So we're paying our folks at the $19.75 level immediately after coming out of the prison system. So not only do we help them with employment because we are the employer of record, but they're also going through one of 2 training systems. One is for broadband technician and the other one is for help desk technician. They test within the 6 months before they leave the system. They test to see which one they want to be a part of. We connect them with the labor unions here. We also pay for their childcare. We pay for the first 3 months of their rent. We pay food, we pay mental health supports, we give them the social supports that they need to do things like conflict resolution and really understanding, how to work in a team environment. I will say that one of the reasons that that we've been doing this work is because there are times that we have had to come into a work environment to train the employer on things like anti-harassment, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-ableism. And a lot of our workforce development cohort don't always necessarily feel comfortable talking to their manager about that, but they do feel comfortable talking to us about that. So they will come in and let us know that there is an issue that they need someone to mitigate. So we've been doing that program for about 2.5 years. We have a 98% success rate. Our collaborative relationship with the employer is that we will maintain and mentor our formerly incarcerated or reentry folks for 2 years if the employer guarantees a job afterwards. So it has ended up being a win-win for all of us. There are some things that we need to tweak a little bit, but that happens with every new program. But one of the things that I did want to elevate was the trusted messenger. One of the things that I've been hearing throughout today's conference was how do we get to communities of color, communities that are in low-income areas, communities that are rural. I cannot stress enough how important the trusted messenger is. Meeting with, partnering, and funding organizations that are already in the weeds in those communities, that are already trusted, that are already going to places where people pay, play, or pray is one of the most important things that I could stress through this. We would not be successful if we had parachuted into any of our locations and told people how we were going to do the work. The reason that we're successful is because people told us what they needed, and we created a program that catered to those needs, that supported what we said we were going to do to this for the state, and also supports our participants at 100%. And I know I'm at time, so I'm going to kick it on over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Stephen.
Thanks very much. So, Keystone Research Center is a research and policy organization. KeystoneResearch.org has most of our stuff. Our mission is promoting shared prosperity. We do basically grounded economics. It's more inductive. A lot of interviews with managers, workers, regulators, case studies, industry studies. We can count as well. But what I like to say is that unlike most economists who study the economy, given the Federal Reserve's presence here, I have to do it. We've done a lot of research on workforce development, including on construction. So there's a lot of consensus in this meeting. We all accept that broadband is an essential utility. Not legally, but in reality. That high-speed, reliable, affordable broadband is a foundation for communities, businesses, families, and schools to thrive. Especially in this final plenary, the critical question then is, what is to be done? What actions do we need to take separately and especially together To achieve the broadband we all agree we need to thrive. Now, one area of focus in this meeting, in which Pennsylvania may actually have more assets than is widely recognized, including in this room, is workforce development. Specifically, the Northeastern Apprenticeship and Training Fund, which the acronym of which is NEAT, delivers line worker apprenticeship training working with IBW locals, including the two big line worker locals in the northern half of Pennsylvania and the southern half of Pennsylvania. And again, I learned in this meeting that they also work with some other locals, like 459 in Johnstown, that Chad talked about. Local 1319 in this northern half of Pennsylvania has a training center in Kingston, Luzerne County, accessible to the eastern half of Pennsylvania's rural T. That local recently purchased a union hall in Meadville in Crawford County, south of Erie, and is erecting a training center there accessible to the western half of Pennsylvania's rural T. Local 126 in the southern half of Pennsylvania has two training centers, one in Collegeville, Montgomery County, and the other in Evansburg in Cambria County, part of one of the poorest rural areas of Pennsylvania. Since 2013, the NEAT Joint Apprenticeship Program has registered 890 line worker apprenticeships in Pennsylvania. These apprentices come from all over the state, including significant numbers from relatively rural areas. I have a map here, believe me, it's all over the state. We have the zip code of every apprentice. The registered apprenticeship database nationally is a hidden treasure, and our quantitative analyst is one of like 3 people in the country who's mastered that database. So these line worker apprenticeships have in the past been almost entirely funded by industry. So by workers and unionized contractors, many of them affiliated with NECA, the National Electrical Contractors Association. 75 cents are contributed currently to NEAT affiliated by NEAT affiliated employers per journey person hour. So that's over the 9-state region that apprenticeship training fund operates. That's $5.5 million from 2020 to 2022. So on a prorated basis, because we're a little over a quarter of those, that's $1.5 million in Pennsylvania. As of late last year, Local 1319 in the northern half of Pennsylvania had 68 active apprentices and 148 people on the waiting list, ready to be inducted into apprenticeship and have gone through the interview and are okay with heights. It met all the basic requirements. Local 126 in the southern half of the state had 237 active apprentices and 211 people on the waiting list, ready to be inducted into apprenticeship. So you can find people to do this work. Those waiting lists make clear that, again, people can be recruited to do the broadband build-out. Each of these local unions last year received a grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry to increase its intake into apprenticeship by at least 20% over 2 years. BEAD funding and the Commonwealth Workforce Transformation Program could provide incentives for further expansion. That expansion could include developing community benefit plans that require hiring of local low-income people and high school graduates who live near where the broadband investment takes place, including through registered pre-apprenticeship programs like the one that Chad described in the workforce development workshop earlier. Increasing apprenticeship ratios, one of the things it does is actually lowers crew costs because apprentices only earn 50% or 60% of the journey person rate in their first year. I'm going to touch very briefly on another sort of controversial workforce issue. There's been a lot of consternation in Pennsylvania in the discussions about the rebuild, about prevailing wage, and whether the line worker rate in Pennsylvania will prevail on the BEAD finance build out. So there's a substantial research literature on prevailing wage laws and whether they raise costs. The peer referee research finds that prevailing wage laws don't significantly raise costs. I'll share a web link with a summary of that research and links to some of that research. At least to me, these findings about prevailing wage not raising costs are not particularly surprising. I've never quite understood why the phrase "you get what you pay for" should apply only to professionals, but not to present skilled trades. That's a form of classism that I find, to use a word, deplorable. There's also a significant body of evidence that some non-union, non-prevailing wage broadband construction is, and we've heard this phrase a couple times in this meeting already, the Wild West. And you know, we heard it from Vermont, and we heard it about the hiring of 1099 workers from Amanda and again the previous workshop, workforce development workshop. I think the Pennsylvania Broadband Authority and the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, with the help of other partners in this room, including Federal Reserve Economists, and if we can be helpful, Keystone Research Center, are actually well positioned to do less hand-wringing and more collective and creative problem solving, both to ensure that Pennsylvania has the skilled workforce it needs for the broadband build-out and to avoid the low road and the rework, costs, injuries, and violations associated with the low road. Again, Chad, for those who saw the workforce development workshop, just describe this pre-apprenticeship program that leads to the line worker apprenticeship in Johnstown, just concretize, you know, if you have an immediate workforce need, you can solve it. So in many ways, I'm talking about scaling that kind of effort. And again, there's a lot of examples now of successful programs. It's not like 12 years ago where pre-apprenticeships, you know, most often failed and weren't trusted by apprenticeship training programs or by building trades business managers. That world has changed. We're in a much stronger position to design a workforce plan and then implement. So I want to end back on the biggest issue, really, which is how we get as close to the ideal of universal, affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband. I look forward to reading the final approved BEAD Volume 2. I probably should have read it already. Couldn't find it just a few months ago. And I look forward to having Sasha and Adil tell me what they think and whether the issue of affordability, including by public-private partnerships, is adequately addressed, or whether we're still being handcuffed by Act 83 and the power of the biggest incumbent providers to limit competition, access most of the funding, but still not sustainably deliver affordability permanently for everyone. Wherever we stand in terms of that plan, it's a collective work in progress. And again, I think the Broadband Authority has been doing great work the last couple of years. It's sort of an impossible situation with a tiny original staff. But given the consensus in this room in terms of what we want, and given the bipartisan business and rural-urban support for the ideal, we should be able to collaborate to get to where we need to get. Now, I think Pennsylvania might be missing the political coalition that can get that done, but again, it's not rocket science. As part of we should certainly demand reporting on price. Sasha reported some progress, but we got to concretize that. The wonderful consumer reports study, national study on price that we should replicate that for Pennsylvania and again repeatedly. I mean, it's outrageous. That's a solvable problem that if you really have the consensus we have in this room, we should be able to solve. My new friends at Connect Humanity also think we might need a piece that makes what people in this room already believe crystal clear to legislators, opinion shapers, and the public. That universal, high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband will have a powerful economic benefit to the state. And, you know, that's not blindingly obvious to everyone, fine. Let's get together and make it blindingly obvious. Again, we did the planning call. I don't know whether I wasn't particularly optimistic, but I have to admit today's conversation has made me more optimistic. I really do think that if we get our act together, we can accomplish more with the money available, and we can get Pennsylvania to a better place.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panel speakers for such thoughtful comments and insights. I'm going to kick us off with a question here, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. And I just want to go down the line in terms of our speakers here. If you were able to identify what you believe to be the top policy recommendations, or maybe top couple of recommendations that you could maybe give the governor, Broadband Authority, Department of Labor and Industry here in Pennsylvania, based on your professional experience, what's something that Pennsylvania could do to improve the workforce policy situation with regard to the broadband employees. So I'll start with Natalie, and we'll go from there.
Well, I think what we see time and time again is that this costs money. And that's why we exist. But it costs money to build the partnerships that we're all describing here. I mean, I think that's what this is not going to be one organization with one employer. I mean, this is a coalition of organizations with coalitions of employers to be able to really solve this problem. So I think what we hear from organizations a lot is that they lack the capacity to do all of the planning work that is necessary and needed to then be able to go after these additional funds that are coming. So I think being able to be able to support local-based organizations who have the trust to be able to build the programs that are effective for their community so that they're ready to go after the other federal and state resources that are coming to us really important. And match money.
I'd say two things. One is, put in a good apprenticeship program, a training program, continuing for career technical education for young folks. Look at your entire work stream, because this work's not going away. Maybe better than 5 years, as we've heard earlier, that technology will be extinct by the time we get it built anyway. So we'll keep working on this. The other thing is I miss the IBEW. I didn't have these problems in the electrical world, so support your unions.
Sharonne, comments and thoughts on your end, one policy priority you'd recommend?
The work has to be funded. The small organizations, the trusted messengers, there is no return on investment better than funding workforce development that is local, that will stay local, and that will keep dollars in our states. The idea that we can just import work and staffing just doesn't make sense anymore. We've got millions of people here in Washington State, in Pennsylvania, in Kentucky that are itching for a job and the opportunity. We need to fund it. And I know some folks are going to hate this. The private public partnership that is required from BEAD and digital equity is the way we're going to do it. The government needs to offer some money up. Public-private partnerships need to invest in the work, and local nonprofits that speak the languages and know the community have to be funded for it.
Thank you. Stephen.
A version of what Natalie said, which is, I think we could use something like a what Canadians might call a sexual human resource council. The Broadband Authority and LNI could collaborate on creating, well, I know it's a version that's already there. But so, and then, mindful of what Christine said about plans just being something written on paper, you want a partnership around that table that's really committed to doing the work. But that's what I'm working on.
Thank you. We still have a few minutes. Questions from members of the audience?
Stephen, I want to follow up on your statement about prevailing wage. So when I'm not doing broadband, I'm an economic developer. And so we do a lot of construction projects and whatnot, and prevailing wage absolutely drives the cost up. So I want to circle back to, were you referring specifically to broadband projects, or were you just and the website you references it across the board? Because I'm gobsmacked by that statement.
But I'm not gobsmacked by that statement. Given where you come from, there is a great deal of storytelling. You could say it's on both sides of that. It goes back decades. One of the favorite things for the Pennsylvania School Boards Association or PSATs to do, like this, prevailing wage and getting a carve out of prevailing wage is a perennial. Now they raise Jews. And so people tell them that these stories, and they've got all their anecdotes. Well, my friends in the unions have their anecdotes too, about projects that were screwed up by shoddy work. I'll show you in broadband space in the second white paper that Reimagine Appalachia done this issue. I'll give you a link with lots of examples with pictures of shoddy work.
Right.
So this is an offline conversation. There is a limited academic literature on this issue, which uses statistical methods that are more rigorous. It's hard because no two construction projects are alike. But I'm telling you, the community, the economic development community has been telling itself just so stories, and fueled to some extent by the right-wing Commonwealth Foundation and others, right? I mean, there's a whole right-wing infrastructure that does all the same. You can save 30% on a construction project by not having prevailing wage. Wait a minute, labor costs are typically like 25%. How can you save 30%? Right? So, and you look at their calculations. They're hypotheticals. Instead of looking at actual evidence and experience, they do hypothetical calculations. It's a what-if story of if you eliminated prevailing wage and it lowered the wage and benefit by this much, and it had no impact on anything else, like productivity or turnover, then how much would you save? That's not research. That's nonsense. So again, you can tell I have some strong feelings about this, but so I think the economic development community doesn't know how weak the evidence is that prevailing wage actually raises costs, and I'm happy to share with you and others the literature I know.
Yeah, let me jump in on this too, because I grew up in manufacturing, and this feels like the 80s in manufacturing. With manufacturing, we were getting killed by Japan, and I got well known for this lean manufacturing, was one of the earliest adopters in the country. So King will have me go in their cooking plants. Actually, Honda hired me with the entire process of the automobile. So for 2 years, I did that. And when I saw manufacturing, was this exact focus on labor, so wrong, because quality and rework cost you far more than labor. In this industry, the number I think is low, but I've gone out and talked to workers in the field. I saw this in the electric utility side. I said, 30% of the jobs, people are showing up and they're not ready. And then the rework that was done, is being done in the utility world, was, I took over a bankrupt utility, brought it to an A+ company, not focusing on labor, but focusing on quality and cutting down rework and planning better. 95% of people get up every day and want to do a good job. It's management that screws it up. It's the process it's process failure. Stop focusing on labor costs, because you could get a lot better quality product and low-cost product by focusing on doing it right and pay a little more.
Other questions from the audience?
I have a question. I'm interested in what the thoughts are from the group around what happens after the build. So we need a big surge in capable, skilled laborers to do fiber builds, and we're going to need it for 5 or 10 years. There is ongoing maintenance, but there's not as much need for labor in an ongoing sense as there is in the upfront build surge sense. I'm interested in what the thoughts are around where the workforce goes after the build.
So I'm going to jump in because I haven't been thinking about that question preparing for this session. And in the end, I think it's something one has to think about seriously. It might be true that smart grid is going to create the ongoing demand for these folks that last longer, and so they won't be suddenly jobless. And again, particularly if they've been given broad training and a portable credential like a journey worker's card, then they'll be fine. But I think it's a totally legitimate question that has to be thought about seriously, and it's not the role of public policy to create a massive glut, an oversupply of a certain kind of worker, so that 3 years or 5 years from now, a third of them can be laid off. Right?
Yeah, and don't look at jobs, look at career paths. That's in our plan. We look at, there's many places you can go. Look at this as a great place. Right, there's a lot, I'm a non-traditional learner. I've done pretty well in life as a non-traditional learner. But there's a large percentage of people in school today that are non-traditional learners. This would be such a great entry for them to get into a whole new set of professions, maybe even leading to things like engineering. Those are the kind of things we have in our plan.
Yeah, here. I think that's what feels exciting to me about thinking about broadband as a sector. You know, I mean, this is something that has, I mean, the previous panel just said that so beautifully. Like, this is a sector, and just like any sector, the jobs are very diverse. And so I think being able to make sure that when we are developing workforce programs, we are thinking that long term, and we are prioritizing credentialing, we are prioritizing certifications so that people are not just getting trained for this specific job. Amelia, I think you said that so well too, is like the focus, there's such a balance of like skill-based versus knowledge-based. I mean, truly, this is what she said that I took notes on, so I'm gonna say it again because I think it makes a lot of sense, which is like, how do we make sure we're preparing people for a career? You know, we're not just teaching them how to do this one job, but this is an opportunity. Broadband is such a quintessential example of a new economy within tech. I mean, this could be a stepping stone if we're smart about it, and I think should be. And tracking those career paths, what is this first step for, and how do we then help folks use this as a learning experience for themselves to decide what they want to do next? Even though I do think the jobs are going to be there, and you know, if this infrastructure moment wasn't a moment for people to enter a workforce and learn what they like and are good at and go find another career within their communities, I mean, what a win. It'd be incredible.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, if you look at the growth of technology, our technology shifts are exponential in speed. So we should never think of training for a job. It's because it's impossible to know what you're going to be doing 10 years from now.
Time for one last question.
Yeah, so Natalie, this question is for you. What should broadband leaders be thinking about or talking about with regard to clean energy partners and other folks who might either be pulling from the same pool of workers or might want to band together on workforce training? Like, what should those conversations be looking like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really appreciated someone asked Chad kind of the example of how the co-op was thinking about these hand in hand too. Yeah, so I mean, I guess one thing that's coming to mind, especially after this question, is I do think there is a shared career pathway opportunity here. So making sure that there are conversations, certainly with unions. I mean, a lot of the unions that we're talking about here are doing trainings both in broadband and in clean energy. So I think we have really strategic opportunities for union and community technical college trainings to be strategic about similarly not training folks just for a job, but for a skill set that is transferable across both of these new sectors that are really expanding. So I think that's where my brain is going too, is just making sure that we're really mapping where these skill sets are. I think there is so much alignment and there is so much expanding funding for both of these areas. So how do we take advantage of the workforce development funds that are available now to be building training and certification that is relevant for all of the federal investments? It's not just broadband, a ton in clean energy as well. And I think both of these again are sort of this moment, we're in this moment where the federal government is investing in the expansion of these two new industries and sectors. And what gets me so excited about these conversations is that we have an opportunity to bring folks that have not previously been in this kind of workforce in, but that means we need to be talking about this really differently. And that's why we have to be pairing the expert trainers with the folks that are expert in reducing workforce barriers, whether that's nonprofits, workforce development boards, being really serious so that we get this right and that we don't all of a sudden look up and it's the same folks that have been in the workforce and the same people that have been left behind in this transition are still left. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
And I apologize, I missed Sharonne's hand online. Sharonne, did you want to add something as well? My apologies.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to say that one of the things that I want to caution all of us is let's not assess our workforce development folks as going to need something in 2 to 3 years. Like what we're training them to do is be a part of the workforce. And this conversation comes up a lot in the circles that I'm in, but I never hear anybody say, well, what's going to happen to all the doctors in 5 years? Like what's going to happen to all the software engineers in 5 years? And I think we need to really look at the bias that we have of people that are entering this kind of workforce, because if we're training them correctly, we're training them to be critical thinkers, not just one job, right? We're training them to be able to assess what they love, what their passion is, and what they want to do with their life, and not just giving them a job as a cashier somewhere because that's the dead end job. That's not what we're doing. If we're doing workforce development right, we're giving folks the ability, the education, and the critical skills to be able to decide what they want to do with their lives, not what we think they should be doing. So let's not assume that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, because the BEAD money is going to go away, that these folks are not going to be the foundation and the cornerstone of every single zip code that they live in. They're going to be the folks that are going to be bringing the money to local, rural, and low income communities. They're not going to need us to pity them. They're going to need us to support them because they're going to have those other jobs. We're not training them to have a dead end job. We're training them to have careers. And I just want us to acknowledge and look at our own bias when we're talking about these folks, because they're our folks.
Well, Natalie, Christine, Sharonne, Stephen, thank you so much for such a thoughtful conversation. Folks, join me in thanking our